stifling heat of a Kentucky summer night in 1873, the air thick with the scent of tobacco fields and distant rain. In a ramshackle cabin on the outskirts of a forgotten hollow in the Appalachian foothills, a young woman named Eliza Harlan screams into the darkness, her body convulsing not from childbirth, but from something far more sinister, a birth that defies every law of nature and medicine known to man. As the midwife recoils in horror, what emerges isn't a child but a creature with elongated limbs, skin mottled like decaying bark, and eyes that glow with an unnatural, predatory gleam. This isn't folklore. This is the beginning of the Harlan family's curse, a genetic nightmare that would span generations, leaving a trail of deformed births, unexplained deaths, and whispers of something inhuman lurking in the bloodline. From that blood-chilling moment, a wave of dread washes over you, doesn't it? Fear grips your chest as you picture the midwife's trembling hands. Intrigue pulls you deeper into the shadows of that cabin, and a flicker of empathy stirs for Eliza, a simple farm girl trapped in a web of inherited horror. But beneath it all lies horror, pure, visceral horror, at the thought that science, even in its nascent 19th century form, could offer no explanation, no cure, only futile probes into the abyss of human frailty. What if this wasn't just a tragic anomaly, but a hidden secret buried in the DNA of an entire family? A disturbing truth that challenges everything we believe about evolution, heredity, and the monsters we carry within ourselves? Think about it. Behind this grotesque delivery lies an unexpected twist, a revelation so profound it could shatter your understanding of the human mind, or rather, the fractured psyche born from bodies that refuse to be human. Why did the Harlan's deformities escalate over decades, twisting not just flesh but souls into something unrecognizable? Was it a psychiatric unraveling triggered by the physical torment, or something darker, a collective madness passed down like a poisoned heirloom? And the most chilling question of all, if science couldn't explain it then, what stops it from happening in your own family tree today? These enigmas hang in the air like fog over the hollow, unresolved, pulling you toward the edge of the unknown. Stay with me, because only by journeying to the end will you uncover the key that unlocks this labyrinth of genetic terror. This case, drawn from the shadowed annals of American monsters, exposes the fragility of our morality in the face of the inexplicable, how the human mind, pushed to its limits by bodily betrayal, can warp into patterns of isolation, rage, and delusion that mirror the deformities themselves. It reminds us that anyone, no matter how ordinary, can be vulnerable to the evil woven into our very biology, a predator waiting to awaken. We're all just one twisted strand of DNA away from the abyss. Now, let's connect right here. If this opening scene has you hooked, hit that like button below, not just to support the channel, but to shine a light into these dark corners so more souls can confront the bizarre truths we dare to unearth. And in the comments type, "I'm ready to discover the truth about the Harlan curse," to affirm your place in this unraveling mystery. By doing so, you're not alone. You're joining a community of truth seekers, brave enough to peer into the psychiatric voids that society shuns, forging bonds over the stories no one else will tell. Thank you for stepping into this with me. You're already part of the elite who seek what lies hidden. Prepare yourself, because what comes next contains a key revelation that will forever change the way you see the human mind. The scream that tore through the Harlan cabin that fateful night in 1873 wasn't just Eliza's, it was the birth cry of a legend that would haunt the hollows of Kentucky for generations. The midwife, a weathered woman named Margaret Boone, stood frozen as the flickering oil lamp cast grotesque shadows on the walls. The thing Eliza birthed wasn't a child, not in any human sense. Its limbs were unnaturally long, bending at angles that mocked anatomy, and its skin, a patchwork of grayish-green mottling, seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive with something beneath. Its eyes, God help them, were too large, too reflective, locking onto Margaret with a gaze that felt like a predator sizing up prey. She dropped her tools, muttering prayers, and fled into the night, leaving Eliza trembling alone with her abomination. By morning, the infant was gone, vanished from the blood-soaked straw bed, and Eliza, pale and silent, refused to speak of it. But the whispers had already begun, slithering through the hills like a venomous fog. In the days that followed, the small community of Troublesome Creek, nestled deep in the Appalachian wilderness, buzzed with dread and speculation. The Harlans were already outcasts, a reclusive clan known for their strange habits, rarely venturing into town, trading only in whispers at dusk. Their farmstead a labyrinth of overgrown paths and sagging barns. But this was no mere eccentricity. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones of curses, of deals struck with dark forces in the woods, or worse, of a bloodline tainted by something older than the hills themselves. Some swore they saw shapes moving in the Harlan fields at night, too tall, too thin, too wrong. Others claimed Eliza's screams still echoed in the wind, a warning to stay away. Yet no one dared approach the Harlan land, not even the preacher, who clutched his Bible tighter when their name was mentioned. What made this moment so chilling wasn't just the birth itself, but the questions it birthed alongside it. Why had the child vanished? Had Eliza, in her delirium, done something unspeakable? Or had the creature, for what else could it be, slithered away under its own power? And why did the Harlans, already steeped in isolation, seem to close ranks further, as if guarding a secret too heavy for the world to bear? The truth, or at least the fragments of it, began to surface through the cracks of their silence. Eliza's husband, Amos Harlan, a gaunt man with hollow eyes, was seen digging in the woods at midnight, his shovel striking earth with frantic urgency. When a neighbor dared ask, Amos only muttered, "Some things ain't meant to see daylight," before disappearing into the trees. The townsfolk assumed he'd buried the child, or whatever it was, but no one could confirm it. No grave was ever found. This wasn't just a physical anomaly. It was the spark that ignited a psychological descent for the Harlans and those who crossed their path. Eliza, once a vibrant girl who sang hymns at church, withdrew into a shell of paranoia, muttering about eyes in the dark watching her. Her mind, already fragile from the trauma, began to fracture, weaving delusions that the child wasn't gone but waiting for her, for them all. The townsfolk, too, weren't immune. Margaret, the midwife, began suffering nightmares so vivid she swore the creature was in her room, its claws scraping at her throat. She stopped delivering babies, claiming she saw the Harlan mark in every newborn's eyes. The collective fear fed a hysteria that turned neighbor against neighbor, each wondering if the Harlan curse could spread, like a contagion carried on the wind. But the most unsettling detail wasn't the rumors or the madness, it was the pattern. Eliza wasn't the first Harlan to birth something strange. Old-timers recalled her mother, Abigail, who'd lost 3 infants under mysterious circumstances in the 1840s, each pregnancy shrouded in whispers of deformity and death. And Abigail's mother before her, a woman named Ruth, was said to have birthed a stillborn with limbs like a spider in the 1820s. The Harlan women, it seemed, carried a legacy of horror in their wombs, each generation producing offspring that defied God and science alike. Yet no doctor, no scholar could explain why. The Harlans weren't just a family. They were a living enigma, a genetic riddle that seemed to mock the very laws of nature. As the years crept on, the Harlan name became synonymous with dread. By the 1880s, their farmstead was a place of pilgrimage for the curious and the morbid, though few dared cross the property line. Those who did spoke of eerie silences broken by distant howls, of shadows that moved against the moonlight without a source. The psychological toll on the family was palpable. Amos grew violent, lashing out at anyone who mentioned Eliza's child, while their surviving children, 2 boys and a girl, bore subtle but unsettling traits: elongated fingers, pale skin that seemed to bruise at a touch, and eyes that lingered too long on strangers. The community's fear deepened, not just of the Harlans, but of what their existence implied, that something unnatural could take root in human flesh, twisting it into something other, something that thought and watched and waited. This was only the beginning. The Harlan curse, as it came to be called, wasn't a single event but a chain of horrors that would unravel over decades, each link more disturbing than the last. What drove Eliza to her breaking point? What did Amos bury in those woods, and why did the Harlan children grow up with secrets locked behind their unnatural gazes? The answers lie deeper in the hollow, where the truth festers like a wound that refuses to heal. Deeper in the hollow, where the mist clung to the ancient oaks like forgotten sins. The Harlan curse didn't fade with time. It evolved, burrowing into the family's veins like a parasite that fed on secrecy and despair. By the turn of the century, the whispers from that 1873 night had grown into full-blown legends, but it was in the 1980s that the true horror resurfaced. No longer confined to faded folklore, but manifesting in living flesh and fractured minds. Eliza and Amos were long gone, their graves unmarked in the overgrown family plot. But their descendants carried the weight of that vanished child like a phantom limb. Enter Jacob Harlan, Eliza's great-grandson, a lanky man in his 40s with the same elongated fingers and pallid skin that marked his kin. In 1982, under the harsh fluorescent lights of a rural Kentucky clinic, Jacob's wife Sarah gave birth to twins, boys who, at first glance, seemed normal. But as the doctor examined them, his face drained of color. Their skin held a subtle bluish tint, not from oxygen deprivation, but from something deeper, something genetic that defied the textbooks. Methemoglobinemia, the doctor stammered. A rare blood disorder that turned the skin blue, but this was different. Exaggerated, twisted with other anomalies. Joints that hyperextended unnaturally. Eyes that reflected light like a cat's in the dark. Science had a name for the blue skin, but not for the rest. Not for the way the twins' cries sounded less like infants and more like distant, echoing howls from the woods. The clinic in Hazard, Kentucky, a small town still shadowed by the Appalachian poverty of the Reagan era, became the unwitting stage for this revival of terror. Sarah, a woman hardened by years of Harlan isolation, clutched her babies close, her own skin bearing faint traces of the family mark, a mottled pattern that emerged under stress, like bruises blooming from nowhere. Jacob paced the linoleum floor, his mind racing back to the stories his grandfather told, of Eliza's monster, of children born wrong and spirited away to spare the family shame. But these twins, named Elijah and Ezra, weren't vanishing. They were here, squirming proof that the curse had skipped generations only to strike harder. The doctor, a young outsider fresh from medical school, probed for answers. Family history, environmental factors, perhaps coal mine toxins seeping into the water. But Jacob's responses were cryptic, laced with paranoia. "Ain't no poison in the well," he growled. "It's in the blood. Always has been." The examination room filled with an unspoken dread, the air thick as if the hollow's fog had followed them inside. Nurses whispered in the hall, recalling old tales of the Blue Fugits, a similar family from the same region. But the Harlans were different, darker, their afflictions tied not just to blue skin but to deformities that suggested inbreeding or something worse, something science shied away from naming. As the twins grew, the psychological fissures began to crack open, turning the Harlan home, a dilapidated trailer on the old farmstead, into a pressure cooker of madness. By 1985, Elijah and Ezra, now toddlers, exhibited behaviors that chilled even the most stoic locals. Their skin's blue hue deepened in anger, pulsing like a living bruise, and their elongated limbs allowed them to contort in ways that mimicked the nightmarish descriptions from Eliza's era. But it was their minds that truly unnerved. They spoke in a shared language, a guttural mix of English and unintelligible hisses, as if communicating with unseen entities in the walls. Sarah, overwhelmed, descended into delusions, convinced the twins were reincarnations of Eliza's lost child, come back to claim the family. She'd rock them at night, singing fractured lullabies about eyes in the dark, her voice trembling with a mix of maternal love and terror. Jacob, meanwhile, turned to the bottle, his paranoia escalating into violence. He'd barricade the doors at dusk, muttering about shadows in the trees, shadows with limbs too long, watching, waiting. The family's isolation deepened. Neighbors avoided the Harlan land, where strange lights flickered in the windows and eerie cries pierced the night. This resurgence in the 1980s wasn't isolated. It rippled outward, infecting the community with a collective hysteria reminiscent of the original event. In Troublesome Creek, now a fading coal town battered by economic decline, folks gathered at the local diner, swapping stories over bitter coffee. One miner claimed he'd seen the twins playing in the woods, their bodies bending like willow branches, chasing something invisible with predatory grace. Another, a schoolteacher, refused to enroll them, citing unnatural influences that made other children have nightmares. Even the local psychiatrist, Dr. Elias Thorne, a grizzled veteran of Vietnam who specialized in rural mental health, got involved when Sarah sought help in secret. In his cluttered office, amid stacks of DSM manuals from the era, Sarah poured out her fears, the twins' stares that seemed to peer into her soul, their drawings of twisted figures with glowing eyes, and her own growing conviction that the family was cursed by something extraterrestrial, or worse, demonic. Dr. Thorne diagnosed it as shared psychotic disorder, a folia famile where delusions spread like a virus within the isolated unit. But privately, he wondered, was it purely psychiatric, or did the genetic anomalies, those unexplained deformities, play a role, altering brain chemistry in ways science hadn't yet mapped? The emotional toll was devastating. Imagine Sarah's heartache, cradling her sons who looked at her not with childish innocence but with an ancient, knowing gaze that made her skin crawl. Feel Jacob's rage. A man trapped in a body that betrayed him, his elongated fingers clumsy on tools, his mind haunted by ancestral ghosts, and the twins themselves, innocent yet monstrous, their young psyches warped by the stares and whispers of a world that rejected them. This wasn't just a medical curiosity, it was a human tragedy, where physical aberrations fueled mental unraveling, creating a feedback loop of horror. By 1987, the family drew media attention. A tabloid reporter from Louisville snuck onto the property, snapping photos of the blue monsters of Kentucky. The article exploded, dubbing the Harlans America's genetic freaks, igniting a firestorm of curiosity and cruelty. Hate mail poured in, locals vandalized their trailer, and the twins, now 5, began exhibiting violent outbursts. Elijah once clawed at a neighbor's dog, his nails drawing blood with unnatural sharpness, while Ezra stared down bullies until they fled in tears, claiming he whispered secrets into their minds. But beneath the surface lurked a deeper mystery. Genetic tests, rudimentary in the 80s, revealed the methemoglobinemia, but the other traits, hyperflexible joints, nocturnal vision, mottled skin, eluded explanation. Dr. Thorne collaborated with a geneticist from the University of Kentucky, who hypothesized recessive mutations amplified by generations of inbreeding, common in isolated Appalachian clans. Yet samples showed anomalies, extra chromosomal markers, unexplained protein folds that hinted at something evolutionary, or perhaps environmental, like radiation from forgotten mine shafts. The psychiatrist noted psychiatric parallels, the family's history of schizophrenia-like symptoms, hallucinations of watchers in the woods, which he linked to the stress of deformity. But Sarah's journals, discovered later, painted a darker picture. Entries about dreams where the twins merged into one being, a creature from Eliza's night, whispering prophecies of more births, more horrors. As the decade waned, the Harlans retreated further, their trailer a fortress of tin and terror. Jacob's alcoholism led to rages where he'd destroy furniture, screaming about the blood debt. Sarah's delusions peaked in a suicide attempt, slashing her wrist to bleed out the curse only to be saved by the twins, who found her and licked the wounds clean with tongues that seemed too long, too rough. The incident scarred everyone, deepening the psychiatric chasm. Dr. Thorne's sessions revealed intergenerational trauma, how each Harlan generation passed down not just genes, but stories of monstrosity, embedding a self-fulfilling prophecy of madness. The twins, articulate beyond their years, spoke of ancestors in the mirror, reflections that moved independently, fueling their own budding psychoses. As the 1980s bled into the 1990s, the Harlan trailer stood like a rusted monument to dread, its aluminum walls battered by Kentucky storms and the weight of unspoken horrors. Elijah and Ezra, now teenagers in 1994, were no longer the eerie toddlers who unnerved neighbors. They had grown into something far more unsettling, tall, wiry figures whose blue-tinged skin shimmered under moonlight, their hyperflexible limbs moving with a grace that felt both hypnotic and predatory. Their eyes, reflective like polished obsidian, seemed to pierce through flesh, reading secrets no one dared voice. The small community of Troublesome Creek, already steeped in the Harlan mythos, now treated the twins as specters, crossing the street to avoid their gaze, whispering that the boys weren't just deformed, they were something else, something that belonged to the Hollow's shadows rather than the world of men. But it wasn't their appearance alone that fueled the fear. It was the psychological unraveling that seemed to radiate from them, a darkness that twisted the minds of those who got too close. By their mid-teens, Elijah and Ezra exhibited behaviors that pushed the boundaries of psychiatric understanding. At school, a rare venture forced by social services, they were pariahs, their shared language now a private code of hisses and murmurs that made classmates shiver. Teachers reported incidents. Elijah once stared at a bully until the boy collapsed in a panic attack, babbling about blue devils crawling inside his skull. Ezra, quieter but no less menacing, left drawings in his desk. Intricate sketches of humanoid figures with elongated limbs, surrounded by symbols no one could decipher, as if channeling a nightmare from another plane. The school psychologist, a nervous woman named Clara Hensley, attempted to evaluate them, but her sessions ended abruptly when Ezra leaned forward and whispered, "You dream of the Hollow, don't you?" "It dreams of you too." Clara quit the next day, refusing to return to the school, her sleep plagued by visions of glowing eyes in the trees. At home, the Harlan family was a cauldron of dysfunction. Sarah, now in her late 30s, had never recovered from her suicide attempt, her mind a fragile mosaic of delusions and guilt. She believed the twins were emissaries of the curse, sent to punish the family for sins buried in the 1873 night. She'd sit for hours staring into a cracked mirror, claiming she saw Eliza's face, her great-grandmother-in-law, mouthing warnings about the blood waking up. Jacob, consumed by alcoholism and paranoia, had become a ghost of himself, his elongated fingers trembling as he clutched a shotgun, convinced the woods were alive with watchers, entities he believed were tied to the twins' birth. The trailer was a fortress of fear, its windows boarded, its air thick with the stench of whiskey and unwashed dread. Yet the twins thrived in this chaos, their bond growing stronger, their minds sharper as if feeding off the family's collapse. They'd disappear into the woods for hours, returning with dirt-caked hands and cryptic smiles, leaving Sarah to sob that they were digging for the first one, the child from Eliza's night. The psychological toll on the community was palpable, echoing the hysteria of the 1870s. In 1995, a local pastor, Reverend Amos Tate, named ironically after Eliza's husband, began preaching about the Harlans as a sign of end times, citing their deformities as proof of demonic tampering. His sermons, delivered in a clapboard church under flickering fluorescent lights, drew crowds desperate for answers in a town gutted by coal mine closures. He claimed the twins' anomalies weren't genetic but spiritual, a corruption that could spread through proximity. When a teenager went missing after trespassing on Harlan land, rumors exploded. Some said the twins had lured him into the woods, others that he'd seen something so horrific he'd fled into the hills. The boy's body was never found, but his backpack, torn and stained with a bluish residue, turned up near the Harlan trailer, fueling tales of ritualistic horror. The sheriff, a pragmatic man named Carl Dutton, dismissed the supernatural talk but couldn't ignore the twins' effect. Domestic disputes spiked. Locals reported nightmares, and even his deputies refused nighttime patrols near the Hollow. Dr. Elias Thorne, the psychiatrist from the 1980s, returned to the case, now semi-retired but drawn back by a morbid fascination. In a series of clandestine interviews conducted in a motel room to avoid the Harlan land, he documented the twins' psychological state. Elijah was dominant, charismatic in a chilling way, his words laced with a hypnotic cadence that made Thorne's skin crawl. He spoke of knowing things beyond human understanding, of memories that weren't his, as if ancestral traumas lived in his mind. Ezra, more withdrawn, described visions of a blue world where the Harlans belonged, a place of endless forests and glowing eyes. Thorne's notes, later published in an obscure journal, suggested a rare form of shared delusional disorder, amplified by their genetic isolation and the family's obsession with its own curse. But he privately admitted doubt. The twins' intelligence was off the charts, their reasoning almost otherworldly, as if their mutations extended to neural pathways science hadn't mapped. Genetic tests, now more advanced, revealed further anomalies, unclassified mutations in their DNA, sequences that hinted at evolutionary divergence, as if the Harlans were a branch of humanity veering into the unknown. The emotional weight of this chapter is crushing. Picture Sarah, a mother torn between love and terror, watching her sons become strangers whose very presence warped reality. Feel Jacob's despair, a man whose body and mind betrayed him, reduced to a sentinel guarding a secret he couldn't comprehend. And the twins. Imagine being born into a world that sees you as a monster, your mind a battleground of inherited horrors and alien impulses. The community, too, suffered. Families locked their doors, children stopped playing in the woods, and the Hollow became a place of dread, its silence heavier than any scream. This wasn't just a family tragedy. It was a collective descent, where the line between psychiatric illness and something unearthly blurred. In 1996, the tension snapped. A group of vigilantes, egged on by Reverend Tate, stormed the Harlan trailer, armed with rifles and torches intent on cleansing the curse. They found the trailer empty, the family gone, vanished into the night like Eliza's child over a century before. The only trace was a series of claw-like marks on the walls, too deep for human nails, and a notebook left on the kitchen table, filled with Ezra's drawings. A family tree, its branches twisting into humanoid shapes with glowing eyes, and a single word scrawled in blue ink: emerge. The vigilantes burned the trailer, claiming it was cursed, but the fire only spread the legend, drawing amateur investigators, tabloid reporters, and even a cryptozoologist who claimed the Harlans were proof of genetic cryptids, humans altered by forces beyond science. Where had the Harlans gone? Rumors swirled. Some said they'd fled to another hollow, others that they'd joined whatever lurked in the woods. Dr. Thorne, shaken by the notebook's contents, began to question his own rationality, wondering if the twins' visions were delusions or glimpses into a reality humanity wasn't ready to face. The 1990s, with its X-Files-fueled fascination with the paranormal, turned the Harlan disappearance into a cultural footnote, a story whispered in conspiracy forums and late-night diners. But for those who'd known the twins, the fear lingered, a fear that the curse wasn't gone, only dormant, waiting for the next generation to birth its horrors. The Harlan curse seemed to vanish into the Kentucky night after the trailer burned in 1996. Swallowed by the hollow's relentless silence, Troublesome Creek exhaled, hoping the legend would fade like ash in the wind. But in 2002, as the new millennium dawned with its mix of Y2K paranoia and post-9/11 unease, the Harlans resurfaced, not in the Appalachian backwoods, but in the neon-lit underbelly of Louisville, a city far removed from the hollow's shadows. Elijah and Ezra, now in their early 20s, had emerged from their disappearance like specters stepping through a veil, their blue-tinged skin and elongated limbs drawing stares in the urban sprawl. They lived in a dilapidated apartment above a pawn shop, a place reeking of mildew and secrets, where the walls were plastered with Ezra's cryptic drawings, spiraling patterns of eyes and limbs, maps of a blue world that seemed to pulse with life under fluorescent light. Sarah and Jacob were with them, shells of their former selves, their minds eroded by years of running, hiding, and battling the madness that clung to their bloodline like damp rot. But it was the twins who commanded attention, their presence a magnetic pull of dread and fascination, as if the curse had matured into something sharper, more deliberate. Louisville, in the early 2000s, was a city grappling with its own demons: urban decay, opioid surges, and a growing fascination with the occult fueled by internet forums and late-night radio. The Harlans slipped into this chaos unnoticed at first, blending into the city's fringes. Elijah, the more outspoken twin, took odd jobs as a night janitor, his hypnotic charisma disarming coworkers who overlooked his unnatural appearance. Ezra, reclusive and intense, spent hours in internet cafes, typing furiously on message boards about genetic anomalies and ancestral memories, his posts cryptic, yet eerily compelling. Drawing a small but obsessive following, their apartment became a hub for misfits, runaways, conspiracy theorists, and self-proclaimed psychics, who were drawn to the twins' aura, sensing they were more than human, perhaps less. These followers called themselves the Hollowed, a cultish group that revered the Harlans as proof of a hidden truth, a genetic bridge to something ancient and otherworldly. The psychological unraveling of the family deepened in this urban exile. Sarah, now gaunt and hollow-eyed, lived in a fog of medication and delusion, whispering to mirrors about the first one, returning to claim them all. Her journals, later found by a follower, were filled with frantic scrawls. The blood sings at night, it knows where we are. Jacob, crippled by cirrhosis and paranoia, rarely left the apartment, convinced the government was tracking them for their DNA. He'd rigged the windows with aluminum foil, claiming it blocked the watchers who followed them from the hollow. But the twins were the epicenter of the storm. Elijah's charisma masked a growing sadism. He'd manipulate followers into dangerous acts like breaking into abandoned buildings to commune with the blue world, leaving them shaken and loyal. Ezra, meanwhile, exhibited signs of dissociative identity disorder, slipping into trances where he spoke in voices not his own, sometimes Eliza's, sometimes something guttural and ancient, describing a lineage that stretched beyond humanity. Dr. Elias Thorne, now fully retired but still haunted by the case, received anonymous emails, later traced to Ezra, containing scans of DNA reports with annotations. "We are not error. We are design." The city began to feel the Harlan's influence, a psychological contagion that echoed the hysteria of Troublesome Creek. In 2003, a string of bizarre incidents rippled through Louisville's underbelly. A follower of the Hollowed, a young woman named Tara Klein, was found wandering the Ohio River waterfront, babbling about blue gods who showed her the end of humanity. She'd carved spiral symbols into her arms, mirroring Ezra's drawings, and her blood tests showed traces of methemoglobinemia, despite no family history. Another incident involved a pawnshop employee who worked below the Harlan's apartment. He quit after hearing scratching in the ceiling and seeing shadows with 2 long limbs moving behind the walls. The local police, already stretched thin by rising crime, dismissed these as drug-fueled delusions, but a detective named Maria Alvarez took notice. She'd grown up in Hazard, hearing tales of the Harlans, and when she visited the apartment under the guise of a welfare check, she felt an unshakable dread. Elijah greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes while Ezra stared from a corner, sketching her face with unnatural precision. Maria left shaken, her report noting unexplained psychological pressure in their presence, a phenomenon she couldn't quantify. The emotional weight of this chapter is suffocating. Imagine Sarah, a mother reduced to a specter, clinging to love for her sons while fearing they were no longer hers. Feel Jacob's terror, a man whose body and mind betrayed him, trapped in a cycle of ancestral guilt. The twins, now adults, embody a tragic paradox. Brilliant minds warped by a legacy they didn't choose, their mutations a canvas for both awe and horror. And the city itself, caught in their orbit, mirrors the viewer's own unease. What happens when the inexplicable walks among us, wearing human skin but radiating something alien? The Hollowed's devotion only amplified the dread, their blind worship turning the Harlans into mythic figures. While the twins' actions, Elijah's manipulations, Ezra's trances suggested a purpose, a plan, as if the curse was no accident but a deliberate evolution, science once again failed to explain. A geneticist, Dr. Lena Patel, contacted by Detective Alvarez, analyzed blood samples smuggled from a Hollowed member who'd been close to the twins. The results were confounding. The same unclassified chromosomal markers from the 1980s tests, but now with mutations suggesting accelerated adaptation, genes linked to nocturnal vision, heightened pain tolerance, even neural plasticity beyond human norms. Patel hypothesized a founder effect from extreme inbreeding, but privately admitted to Alvarez that the data looked engineered, as if the Harlan's DNA was responding to an external force. Psychiatric evaluations conducted covertly on the Hollowed pointed to mass suggestion and shared psychosis, but the twins' influence was too precise, too consistent to be mere delusion. Dr. Thorne, consulted by Patel, warned of a psychogenetic feedback loop, the Harlan's physical anomalies fueling mental instability, which in turn amplified their physical traits' impact, a cycle that seemed to defy natural selection. Then came the tipping point. In late 2003, a fire broke out in the pawn shop below the Harlan's apartment, killing 2 Hollowed members and leaving behind a chilling discovery, a hidden room filled with bones, some human, some not, arranged in spirals around a single photograph of Eliza Harlan from 1873, her face scratched out. The twins Sarah and Jacob were gone, vanished again, leaving Louisville reeling. The Hollowed disbanded, some institutionalized, others claiming the Harlans had ascended to their blue world. Detective Alvarez, obsessed, found Ezra's final forum post. "The blood is ready. The Hollow calls us home. The fire was ruled arson, but no trace of the family was found. No bodies, no tracks, only whispers in the city's underbelly of blue figures seen fleetingly in alleys, their eyes glowing in the dark. The Harlan curse had slipped back into the shadows, but its grip on the psyche lingered. Louisville's residents, like those in Troublesome Creek decades before, felt marked. their dreams haunted by elongated silhouettes and blue-tinged nightmares. The twins, now mythic, were no longer just a family. They were a phenomenon, a question mark etched into the human genome. What were they becoming? Where had they gone, and what did Ezra's words mean? The Hollow, it seemed, wasn't just a place, it was a state of mind, a destination where the Harlan's truth waited to be born. The Harlan family's disappearance from Louisville in 2003 left a void filled with rumors and dread. But the Hollow, both the physical place in Troublesome Creek and the psychological abyss it represented, seemed to pull them back like a tide reclaiming driftwood. By 2005, whispers of their return began to surface, not in the city, but in the heart of the Appalachian wilderness, where the Harlan farmstead, long abandoned since the 1996 fire, stood as a decaying shrine to their legacy. The trailer's charred skeleton was gone, replaced by a makeshift compound of tarps and salvaged wood, hidden deep in the Hollow's embrace. Elijah and Ezra, now in their mid-20s, had returned with Sarah and Jacob, their family unit, a twisted knot of devotion and madness. But this wasn't a homecoming, it was a reckoning, a deliberate retreat to the land where the curse began, as if the Hollow itself had summoned them to fulfill a purpose etched in their blood. In 2005, the world was distracted by global unrest and the rise of digital culture, but rural Kentucky remained a time capsule of suspicion and superstition. Locals in Troublesome Creek, now a dwindling community of aging coal miners and their families, noticed strange signs: livestock vanishing, their carcasses found days later with surgical precision, drained of blood and arranged in spirals. Footprints, too long, too narrow, circled the Harlan property, and at night the Hollow echoed with sounds that weren't quite human, a mix of howls and whispered chants. The twins, rarely seen in town, were spotted by a hunter named Dale Combs, who swore they moved through the forest with unnatural speed, their blue skin blending with the dusk, their eyes catching moonlight like polished glass. Dale, a Vietnam vet hardened by life, admitted to friends he'd never felt such fear. Not from war, but from the twins' gaze which seemed to unravel his thoughts, planting visions of a blue world where humanity was a forgotten relic. Inside the Harlan compound, the family's psychological descent reached new depths. Sarah, now in her early 40s, was a wraith, her body frail but her mind a kaleidoscope of visions. She spent hours carving symbols into the trees, spirals, eyes, and jagged lines that matched Ezra's drawings from Louisville. She claimed the Hollow was alive, a sentient force guiding the family to complete the cycle. Her journals, later recovered, described dreams of Eliza's child, not dead but waiting underground, its consciousness linked to the twins.
Jacob, barely functional, was a prisoner of his own paranoia.
Convinced the government had implanted trackers in his bones during a hospital stay in the 90s. He'd wander the compound at night, clutching a rusted machete, screaming at shadows he called the Watchers. Yet the twins were the true enigma. Elijah, with his commanding presence, had become a self-styled prophet, speaking of a new lineage that would rise from the Harlan's blood. Ezra, quieter but no less intense, seemed to channel something ancient, his trances now lasting hours, during which he'd scribble pages of unintelligible script, later identified by a linguist as resembling no known language yet eerily structured, as if dictated by an unseen intelligence. The community's fear reignited, a mirror to the hysteria of 1873 and the 1980s. A local teenager, Emily Vance, went missing after sneaking onto the Harlan land on a dare. Her friends reported she'd been obsessed with the twins, drawn by their legend after finding Ezra's old forum posts online. When her body was found a week later deep in the Hollow, it was a grotesque tableau. Her skin faintly blue, her limbs arranged in a spiral, her eyes wide open, reflecting an unnatural sheen even in death. The coroner, baffled, noted traces of methemoglobinemia in her blood, impossible without genetic predisposition. Rumors exploded the twins had infected her, their curse spreading beyond the family. Reverend Amos Tate, now elderly but still preaching fire and brimstone, rallied a new wave of vigilantes claiming the Harlans were a plague on God's earth. But this time, the community was divided. Some, influenced by internet conspiracies, saw the twins as victims of government experiments. Others as proof of alien hybridization, a theory gaining traction in UFO forums after photos of the compound's symbols leaked online. Detective Maria Alvarez, now a seasoned investigator, returned to the case. Haunted by her 2003 encounter in Louisville, she trekked into the hollow with a small team, finding the compound eerily silent, its air thick with the scent of earth and decay.
Inside, they discovered a shrine. Bones, human and animal, arranged around a crude altar with Eliza's scratched-out photograph at its center, surrounded by vials of blue-tinged blood.
Maria's team collected samples, but the twins and their parents were gone, vanished again, leaving behind Ezra's latest notebook. Its pages described a convergence, a moment when the Harlan's bloodline would open the gate to the blue world. Maria, shaken, sent the samples to Dr. Lena Patel, the geneticist from the Louisville investigation. The results were staggering. The blood contained proteins unknown to science, suggesting not just mutation but adaptation to an environment hostile to human life. Low oxygen, high radiation, as if the Harlans were evolving for a world not yet here. Patel's report, leaked to a fringe science blog, sparked a firestorm online, with theories ranging from cosmic radiation to ancient genetic tampering. The psychological impact was profound, a raw wound in the collective psyche. Picture Sarah, her love for her sons warped into worship, carving symbols to appease a force she believed controlled them. Feel Jacob's despair, a man broken by a legacy he couldn't escape, his mind a prison of fear and guilt. The twins, meanwhile, were a paradox. Brilliant, charismatic, yet increasingly detached. Their minds splintered between human emotion and something alien, as if their mutations rewired their souls. The community, too, was fracturing. Families moved away, unable to sleep with the Hollow's whispers in their dreams. Others joined online groups like the Hollowed, now reborn as a digital cult, venerating the twins as harbingers of a new era. Maria, torn between duty and dread, began to question her own sanity. Her nightmares filled with blue figures chanting her name. Dr. Elias Thorne, now in his 70s, received a package from an unknown source, a vial of the blue blood and a note in Ezra's handwriting. The Hollow sees you. Against his better judgment, he resumed his research, consulting with Patel and a neurologist who specialized in anomalous cognition. They hypothesized that the Harlan's mutations affected their brains, amplifying neural pathways linked to perception and suggestion, explaining their ability to unsettle others. But the blood's properties, its resistance to clotting, its faint luminescence, hinted at something beyond genetics, something that made Thorne a lifelong skeptic. Consider the impossible. What if the curse wasn't a defect, but a design, a step toward something humanity wasn't meant to become? In 2006, the compound was destroyed in a forest fire, officially blamed on lightning but whispered to be arson by vigilantes. No bodies were found, but the Hollow's silence grew heavier as if absorbing the Harlan's essence. Maria's investigation stalled, her reports buried by superiors wary of public panic. Online, the Hollowed grew, their forums buzzing with sightings, blue figures in remote forests, strange lights in the Kentucky hills. The twins, it seemed, hadn't vanished. They'd dispersed, their curse no longer confined to one family but spreading, a psychological and genetic contagion that defied explanation. What was the convergence Ezra wrote of? Was the Hollow a place, a state of mind, or a gateway to something else? The answers lay deeper in the blood and the shadows, waiting to be born. The Harlan curse, like a virus dormant in the earth, seemed to pulse stronger after the 2006 fire that razed their compound, as if the Hollow itself was exhaling its secrets into the world. By 2008, the Appalachian wilderness around Troublesome Creek had become a magnet for the curious and the obsessed, drawn by the enigma of a family that defied science and sanity. The Harlans, Elijah, Ezra, Sarah, and Jacob, remained ghosts, their whereabouts unknown. Yet their presence lingered in the collective psyche of those who'd heard their story. But in the spring of that year, a new chapter unfolded, one that suggested the twins' cryptic talk of a convergence was no delusion, but a chilling reality, a moment where the Harlan bloodline's horrors would no longer hide in the shadows. This wasn't just a family saga anymore, it was a phenomenon, a ripple in the fabric of human understanding, threatening to tear open truths too vast, too terrifying to comprehend. In early 2008, a group of amateur investigators, self-styled truth seekers fueled by internet forums and the growing legend of the Hollowed, ventured into the hollow, armed with cameras, EMF meters, and a reckless fascination. Led by a former journalist named Ryan Kessler, who'd stumbled across Dr. Lena Patel's leaked genetic report, they aimed to document the Harlan site, believing it held clues to the family's fate. What they found was no mere ruin. The burned compound had been rebuilt, not with wood or tarp, but with an intricate lattice of branches and stones, arranged in spirals that mirrored Ezra's drawings. At the center stood a crude altar, identical to the one found in Louisville, adorned with vials of blue-tinged liquid and bones etched with symbols. Ryan's team recorded hours of footage, capturing eerie phenomena. Their equipment malfunctioned, compasses spun wildly, and one member, a young woman named Lila Carter, began speaking in a guttural language, her eyes reflecting light like the twins. The footage, later uploaded to a now-defunct blog, showed Lila collapsing, her skin faintly blue, muttering about the convergence coming. She was hospitalized, diagnosed with acute psychosis, but blood tests revealed traces of the same unclassified proteins found in the Harlans. Despite no known contact, this incident ignited a firestorm online. The Hollowed, now a sprawling digital cult with thousands of members across forums like Reddit and obscure chat rooms, saw Lila's transformation as proof of the Harlan's influence, a genetic and psychic contagion spreading beyond the family. Posts flooded in, claiming sightings of blue-skinned figures in forests from West Virginia to Tennessee. Their descriptions chillingly consistent: elongated limbs, reflective eyes, and an aura that triggered nightmares in witnesses. Some claimed the twins were building nests in remote areas, preparing for the convergence, a term now synonymous with an apocalyptic shift, where the Harlan's bloodline would open the gate to their blue world. Detective Maria Alvarez, still haunted by the case, monitored these forums, her inbox flooded with tips from the Hollowed, including grainy photos of spiral symbols carved into trees across the Appalachians. Maria, now pushing 40 and battling insomnia, felt the case consuming her. Her dreams filled with blue figures chanting in the hollow's fog. The psychological toll on those touched by the Harlans was profound. Sarah, if she was still alive, would be a woman broken by decades of fear. Her love for her sons twisted into a worshipful terror of their purpose. Jacob, likely dead or dying from his ailments, remained a tragic figure, his mind a prison of paranoia and ancestral guilt. The twins, now in their late 20s, were enigmas. Elijah's charisma likely honed into a weapon, manipulating followers with a cult leader's precision. Ezra's trances, if they persisted, suggesting a mind fractured between human and something else, a conduit for whatever force drove the curse. The Hollowed's members, meanwhile, exhibited symptoms akin to mass hysteria, shared delusions of a blue awakening, self-harm mimicking the Harlan symbols, and a growing belief that the twins were not cursed but chosen, heralds of a new evolutionary branch. Dr. Elias Thorne, now frail but obsessed, corresponded with Maria, warning that the twins' mutations might be altering their neurochemistry, granting them abilities, empathic manipulation, perhaps even low-level telepathy, that explained their sway over others. He called it psychogenetic dominance, a theory dismissed by peers but chilling in its implications. Science, once again, faltered. Dr. Lena Patel, now a controversial figure in genetics, analyzed Lila Carter's blood samples, finding the same anomalous proteins and chromosomal markers as the Harlans. She published a paper, quickly retracted under pressure, suggesting the mutations could spread through prolonged exposure, not just genetics, a kind of epigenetic contagion triggered by proximity to the twins. The idea was fringe, but it fueled panic. Could the Harlan curse infect others, rewriting their DNA? Maria, working with Patel, interviewed former Hollowed members, many of whom reported physical changes, bluish skin patches, joint hypermobility, after attending rituals led by figures resembling the twins. These rituals, described in hushed tones, involved chanting, bloodletting, and exposure to the blue liquid, which some claimed glowed faintly under moonlight. Patel's tests on the liquid, smuggled from the Hollow's altar, showed it wasn't just blood but a complex biomaterial, resistant to decay and teeming with unknown microorganisms, as if engineered for an alien environment. The emotional weight of this chapter is visceral. Imagine Lila, a young woman seeking truth only to lose her mind to visions she couldn't escape, her body betraying her with traces of a curse she never inherited. Feel Maria's exhaustion, a detective chasing shadows that blurred the line between reality and nightmare, her own sanity fraying as she glimpsed the hollow's truth. The twins, if they orchestrated this, were tragic architects, products of a bloodline that warped their humanity, yet driven by a purpose that felt both divine and monstrous. The community, from Troublesome Creek to the online void, was a tapestry of fear and fascination, torn between condemning the Harlans and worshipping them. The hollow itself seemed alive, its influence seeping into dreams, turning believers into vessels for something incomprehensible. Then, in late 2008, a breakthrough, or a descent. Ryan Kessler, the journalist, received an anonymous tip. Coordinates deep in the hollow where the Harlans were allegedly gathering. He assembled a new team, including Maria, who joined unofficially, driven by a need to end the case. They found a clearing larger than the compound, ringed with spiral-carved trees and centered on a pit filled with blue liquid, bubbling as if alive. Above it, a figure, Elijah, unmistakable in his towering blue-tinged form, stood chanting, surrounded by dozens of followers, their eyes glowing in the dusk. Ezra was there, trance-like, carving symbols into the earth. Sarah and Jacob were absent, their fates unknown. As Maria's team approached, the air grew heavy, their minds clouded with visions of a blue world, endless forests, skies of azure flame. Ryan's camera failed, but Maria's notes later found described Elijah turning to her, his voice a low hum. "The convergence is here. You're part of it now." The team fled, Maria collapsing miles away, her skin faintly blue, her mind reeling with images she couldn't unsee. The clearing was empty when authorities returned. The pit drained, the symbols erased by rain. Ryan vanished, his blog deleted, though fragments of his footage circulated online showing glimpses of the ritual before cutting to static. The Hollow declared the convergence had begun, claiming the Harlans had crossed over, leaving humanity behind. Maria, hospitalized for what doctors called a psychotic break, insisted she'd seen the gate open, a shimmering rift in the air. Patel, analyzing Maria's blood, found the same proteins, now more pronounced, as if the Hollow's influence was rewriting her. Thorne, in his final letter before his death in 2009, wrote, "The Harlans aren't a curse. They're a warning. Something wants in, and their blood is the key." The Hollow was silent again, but the convergence wasn't over. It was spreading, its truth buried in the minds and bodies of those it touched. The night of the 2008 ritual in the Hollow left an indelible scar, not just on those who witnessed it, but on the very fabric of Troublesome Creek's reality. By 2010, the Harlan legend had transcended local folklore, seeping into the broader cultural consciousness of a world gripped by economic collapse and digital paranoia. The internet, now a sprawling web of conspiracy theories and viral mysteries, amplified the Harlan curse into a modern mythos. With the Hollow evolving from a fringe cult into a decentralized movement, their forums buzzing with claims that the twins, Elijah and Ezra, hadn't vanished but had become something else. Entities that moved between worlds. Their blue blood a key to a realm humanity wasn't meant to see. The Hollow itself, once a forgotten pocket of Kentucky, was now a pilgrimage site for the obsessed, its trees scarred with spiral symbols, its air thick with an unease that lingered like damp rot. But the true horror wasn't in the myths, it was in the tangible, inexplicable changes spreading among those touched by the Harlan's legacy, a psychological and genetic contagion that defied reason and hinted at a convergence far from complete. Detective Maria Alvarez, discharged from the hospital in 2009 after her collapse in the Hollow, was a changed woman. Her skin bore faint blue patches that faded under scrutiny, but reappeared in stress, and her dreams were haunted by visions of a blue world, forests of twisted trees, skies pulsing with azure light, and figures with elongated limbs chanting her name. She'd retired from the force, unable to shake the feeling that the ritual had marked her, not just mentally but biologically. Her blood tests, conducted by Dr. Lena Patel, showed the same anomalous proteins as the Harlans, now stable, as if her body had adapted to them. Maria, once a skeptic, began documenting her experiences in a private journal, describing sensations of being watched by something vast, something that whispered through her thoughts. She moved to a small cabin outside Hazard, avoiding the Hollow but unable to escape its pull. Her journal entries, later leaked online, spoke of hearing Elijah's voice in her sleep, urging her to join the convergence and seeing Ezra's symbols in the patterns of frost on her windows. The Hallowed, now a global phenomenon, claimed Maria as proof of the curse's reach. Their forums, encrypted and hidden on the dark web, shared stories of others touched by the Harlans. A trucker in Ohio who developed hyper-flexible joints after driving through the hollow. A hacker in California whose skin turned faintly blue after decoding Ezra's forum posts. A nurse in West Virginia who carved spirals into her arms during a blackout, waking with no memory but a sense of purpose. These cases, scattered but consistent, suggested the Harlan influence was no longer bound to proximity. Dr. Patel, now ostracized by mainstream science, ran a clandestine lab funded by anonymous donors, rumored to be Hallowed members, analyzing samples from these converts. Her findings were chilling. The proteins weren't just foreign. They were adaptive, altering host DNA in ways that mimicked the Harlan's mutations, as if preparing bodies for an environment hostile to baseline humans. She theorized a mimetic genetic hybrid, where exposure to Harlan artifacts, symbols, blood, even their voices, triggered epigenetic changes, a concept so fringe it was dismissed as pseudoscience, yet impossible to ignore given the evidence. The psychological impact was a labyrinth of terror and awe. Maria's journal revealed a woman torn between fear and fascination, her mind a battleground where human reason clashed with alien impulses. She described moments of clarity where she felt more than human, her senses sharper, her thoughts faster, as if the convergence was rewriting her. The Hallowed, meanwhile, embraced this transformation, seeing themselves as pioneers of a new species. Their rituals, held in remote forests and abandoned warehouses, involved chanting Ezra's scripts and ingesting blue-tinged substances, believed to be derived from the Hollow's pit. Participants reported visions of the blue world, some claiming to see Elijah and Ezra as towering figures, their eyes glowing like beacons. These gatherings often ended in chaos, violence, overdoses, or members vanishing, only to resurface with stories of crossing over for brief, disorienting moments. The psychological contagion was undeniable. Entire communities near ritual sites reported nightmares, panic attacks, and a pervasive sense of being watched, as if the Hollow's influence had gone airborne. In Troublesome Creek, the physical Harlan presence was gone, but the Hollow was alive with activity. Locals reported strange phenomena, trees bending without wind, lights flickering in patterns that matched Ezra's symbols, and soil samples from the pit site showing microbial life unknown to science, thriving in conditions lethal to most organisms. A USGS team, sent to investigate in 2010, abandoned their survey after equipment failures and team members suffering migraines and hallucinations. One geologist, Dr. Sarah Kim, later claimed she'd seen a figure, possibly Elijah, standing in the pit, his body half submerged in blue liquid, his voice echoing in her skull. "The gate is open." Her report was buried, but leaked excerpts fueled the Hallowed's belief that the convergence was a physical event, a rift between worlds anchored in the Hollow's soil. The emotional weight of this chapter is staggering. Imagine Maria, a woman who once stood for order, now living as a reluctant prophet, her body and mind a canvas for the Harlan curse. Feel the terror of the Hallowed's converts, drawn to a truth that consumed their humanity. Their devotion a mix of worship and dread. Picture the twins, if they still lived, as architects of a new reality. Their mutated minds orchestrating a shift that blurred the line between madness and transcendence. The community, local and global, was fracturing, caught between fear of the unknown and a primal urge to understand it. The Hollow wasn't just a place anymore. It was a state of being, a psychological vortex that pulled in anyone who dared look too long. In 2011, a breakthrough, or a descent, shattered the fragile calm. A Hallowed member, a former geneticist named Paul Reyes, claimed to have decoded Ezra's scripts, revealing coordinates across the Appalachians where gates were forming, sites marked by spiral symbols and blue liquid seeping from the earth. Reyes led a group to one such site, a cave near the Hollow, where they found a chamber lined with bioluminescent algae, pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats. Inside, they claimed to see Ezra, his body no longer fully human, his limbs elongated beyond possibility, his eyes a void of light. Reyes's account, posted online before he vanished, described Ezra whispering, "The blood is the bridge. The convergence is now, The cave was sealed by authorities, but satellite images, leaked by a whistleblower, showed spiral patterns spreading across the region, visible only in infrared, as if the land itself was being rewritten. Maria, driven by her visions, returned to the hollow against her better judgment, leaving a final journal entry. "I saw the gate. It's not a place, it's us." She disappeared that night, her cabin empty, her journal left open on the table. The Hollowed hailed her as the first to cross, but her fate remained unknown. The twins, Sarah, Jacob, whether dead, alive, or something else, were absent. Yet their influence was everywhere. In the symbols, the blood, the minds of those who followed. The convergence wasn't an event. It was a process, a slow rewriting of reality, and the Harlan curse was its catalyst. By 2012, the Harlan curse had transcended its origins, no longer just a family tragedy, but a phenomenon that clawed at the edges of human understanding. The hollow in Troublesome Creek, once a mere backdrop to the Harlan's horrors, had become a nexus of fear and fascination, a place where the veil between reality and the incomprehensible seemed to thin. The twins, Elijah and Ezra, along with Sarah and Jacob, remained specters. Unseen since the 2008 ritual, their fates unknown but their influence undeniable. The Hollowed, now a global network of thousands, saw the Harlans as harbingers of a blue awakening, a transformation of humanity itself, driven by the same genetic and psychic contagion that had marked Maria Alvarez and others. The world of 2012, reeling from economic turmoil and apocalyptic anxieties fueled by Mayan calendar prophecies, was fertile ground for such a mythos. But the true horror lay not in the myths but in the tangible, inexplicable events unfolding in the hollow and beyond, where the line between delusion and reality dissolved into a blue-tinged nightmare. The hollow had changed. Hikers and investigators who ventured near the site reported physical anomalies, compasses failing, air pressure dropping inexplicably, and a faint hum, like a heartbeat, emanating from the earth. The cave where Paul Reyes claimed to have seen Ezra in 2011 was sealed, but locals swore blue light leaked from its cracks at night, accompanied by whispers in an unknown tongue. Soil samples smuggled by a rogue biologist named Dr. Hannah Cole revealed microbial life that thrived without oxygen, its DNA laced with the same unclassified proteins found in the Harlan's blood. Cole, a former colleague of Dr. Lena Patel, went public on a podcast, claiming the hollow was a biotic anomaly, a site where evolution was accelerating, possibly triggered by an ancient non-human influence. Her claims were dismissed as fringe, but the Hollowed seized on them, declaring the hollow a womb for the Blue Awakening, where humanity would shed its old form. Cole vanished shortly after. Her lab burned, though rumors persisted she'd joined the Hollowed, converted by her own discoveries. The psychological contagion spread like wildfire. Across the Appalachians and even in distant cities, people reported symptoms: blue-tinged skin patches, hyper-flexible joints, and vivid dreams of a blue world where elongated figures moved through endless forests. A teacher in Pittsburgh carved spirals into her classroom walls during a blackout, later claiming she'd seen Elijah in her dreams, guiding her hand. A programmer in Seattle, after joining a Hollowed forum, developed night vision so acute he could read in near darkness, but his mental state deteriorated, his emails filled with rants about the blood calling. These cases, documented by Patel in a shadow database, showed a pattern: exposure to Harlan artifacts, symbols, blood, or even their online writings, triggered physical and mental changes, as if the curse was a virus that rewrote both body and mind. Patel's own health declined. She reported migraines and visions of Ezra's symbols, her blood test showing faint traces of the Harlan proteins. She confided to a colleague that she feared the curse was alive, a sentient force using the Harlans as vectors. The emotional toll was crushing. Imagine the teacher, a woman dedicated to her students, waking to find her hands stained blue, her mind flooded with images she couldn't unsee. Feel the programmer's terror, his body evolving beyond his control, his thoughts no longer fully his own. The Hollowed, for all their devotion, were fracturing. Some embraced the changes, others descended into paranoia, fearing they'd become puppets of an unseen force. The hollow itself was a psychological black hole, pulling in anyone who lingered too long. Locals avoided it, but outsiders, drawn by YouTube videos and Reddit threads, flocked to the site. Many returning changed, some with physical mutations, others with fractured psyches. Speaking of gates and watchers, a few never returned, their disappearances fueling tales of the blue world claiming its own. In late 2012, a chilling event brought the Harlan legacy back into focus. A Hallowed member, a former soldier named Marcus Tate, grandson of Reverend Amos Tate, claimed to have found the twins in a remote West Virginia forest, living in a camp of spiral-carved trees and blue liquid pools. Marcus, a convert to the Hallowed, live-streamed his journey, his footage shaky but haunting. Elijah, taller and more gaunt than ever, his skin a deep azure, leading a ritual with dozens of followers, their bodies marked with spiral scars. Ezra, barely recognizable, his limbs impossibly long, stood in a trance, chanting in a language that made viewers' screens glitch. Marcus described a gate forming, a shimmering rift in the air through which he glimpsed a blue landscape of twisted flora and glowing eyes. The stream cut off abruptly. Marcus's final words, "The awakening is us." His body was found days later, his skin blue, his joints hyperextended, his autopsy revealing organs rearranged in ways no surgeon could explain. The live stream, though deleted from major platforms, spread virally on the dark web, galvanizing the Hallowed. They declared the Blue Awakening imminent, a moment when the Harlan bloodline would merge humanity with the blue world. Patel, now working in secrecy, analyzed Marcus's remains, finding the Harlan proteins had overtaken his DNA, as if he'd been rewritten from the inside. She hypothesized the twins were no longer human but transitional beings, their mutations a bridge to an evolutionary leap, or a descent into something alien. Maria Alvarez's last known communication, a letter to Patel, echoed this. They're not cursed. They're becoming. And we're next. Maria was never seen again, though hikers reported spotting a blue-skinned woman in the hollow, her eyes glowing, her voice a hum that carried Ezra's cadence. The psychological and genetic puzzle deepened. Patel's research suggested the Harlan mutations were triggered by an external catalyst, perhaps radiation, perhaps something older, buried in the hollow's geology. The symbols, she theorized, weren't just art, but a code, a mimetic trigger that activated latent mutations in susceptible individuals. The Hollowed's rituals, chanting these symbols, seemed to amplify the effect, turning followers into vessels for the curse. But why? Was it evolution, a cosmic experiment, or a deliberate invasion? The Hollow's phenomena, lights, hums, microbial life, suggested a localized anomaly, but reports of similar sites in other forests hinted at a broader network, as if the Harlans were nodes in a global web. The emotional weight is overwhelming. Picture Marcus, a man seeking redemption in the Hallowed, only to become a vessel for a transformation that erased his humanity. Feel Patel's desperation, a scientist chasing truth at the cost of her sanity, her own body betraying her with the curse's mark. The twins, if they still existed, were tragic gods, products of a bloodline that robbed them of normalcy, now driving a change they might not control. The world caught in the Harlan web teetered between awe and terror, its people haunted by dreams of a blue world that felt closer with each passing night. The Hollow was no longer just a place, it was a signal, a call to an awakening that humanity might not survive. The Harlan curse, born in a scream-soaked Kentucky night in 1873, had woven a tapestry of terror that stretched across centuries, from the shadowed hollows of Troublesome Creek to the digital arteries of a world unready for its truth. By 2012, Elijah and Ezra, the blue-skinned twins, along with Sarah and Jacob, had vanished into myth, their bodies, or whatever they had become, lost to the Hollow's embrace. Yet their legacy pulsed on, not just in the genetic anomalies that marked their bloodline, but in the minds and bodies of those they touched. Maria Alvarez, the Hallowed, the countless others whose dreams now carried whispers of a blue world. The convergence, the Blue Awakening, wasn't a singular event but a creeping tide, a rewriting of flesh and psyche that left humanity teetering on the edge of the unknown. Was it evolution, madness, or something older? Something that chose the Harlans as its vessel? The Hollow, with its spiral-carved trees and glowing earth, held no answers, only questions that burned like embers in the souls of those who dared to look. You've journeyed with me through this labyrinth of horror, from Eliza's monstrous birth to the twins' transformation into something beyond human, and you've seen how the Harlan curse clawed its way into the world. twisting genes, minds, and reality itself. You're part of a rare breed, a select few who've dared to peer into the abyss of the inexplicable, to confront a truth that most would flee. For that I salute you. You've walked the dark paths of the Hollow, felt the weight of its secrets, and emerged with a new lens on the fragility of the human condition. The Harlans weren't just a family. They were a mirror, reflecting our vulnerability to the forces, genetic, psychic, or cosmic, that lurk just beyond our understanding. Their story asks us to question, what lies dormant in our own blood, waiting to awaken? What shadows move in the corners of our minds, whispering truths we're not ready to hear? Now let's seal this journey with a bond. In the comments below, share your truth. Type, "This story changed how I see the human mind," or let us know what this tale stirred in you. By doing so, you're not just sharing a thought. You're marking yourself as one of the fearless, a seeker of the hidden truths that society buries. Your words will connect you to a community of those who, like you, refuse to look away from the darkness, who crave the unsettling stories that no one else dares tell. Your comment is a beacon, drawing others to this mystery, building a tribe united by curiosity and courage. And don't stop there. Share this video with someone who needs to know, someone who can handle the weight of the Harlan curse. By sharing, you're spreading a spark, igniting conversations that pierce the veil of the ordinary, exposing the raw, unfiltered edges of existence. Think of this channel as a lantern in the fog, guiding you through the shadows of the bizarre and the disturbing. Subscribe now, and let's keep that light burning, illuminating the stories that haunt the fringes of our world. Picture yourself as part of a growing circle, a fellowship of minds unafraid to chase the inexplicable, to unravel the enigmas that lurk in our blood, our dreams, our earth. The Harlan curse is just one thread in a vast unseen tapestry. There are more stories, more mysteries waiting to be explored. Keep watching, keep questioning, because the truth is out there, buried in the hollows of our reality, and only the brave will find it. The Harlan saga leaves us with a final, unsettling reflection. The human mind, so fragile yet so potent, can be reshaped by forces we don't understand. Be it a mutation, a belief, or a whisper from the void. The twins Elijah and Ezra may be gone, but their blue world lingers, a shadow cast across our own. Every nightmare, every fleeting glimpse of something wrong in the mirror, carries their echo. What if the convergence isn't over? What if it's in you, in me, waiting for the right moment to awaken? The Hollow is silent now, but its pulse beats on in the blood of those it touched, in the stories we tell, in the questions we dare to ask. Thank you for being here, for daring to know. Let's keep seeking together until the truth, no matter how monstrous, comes to light.